All right, another video by Norwich93CMP. We're doing the Carbine Club's data sheet. This section is going to be about the trigger housing. So the first one is we're going to talk about is the M1s and M2s, milled and stamped. So basically, an M1 style there's just a difference. This is cut on the left-hand side for the 9 spring, and it's open on the right-hand side. M1s do not have that cutout area on the left-hand side. Okay, so that's how you tell between an M1 and an M2 trigger housing. Now, stamped versus milled this is milled from one piece of steel. If you look on this flat right here, there's no lines. Look at this one, there's a bunch of lines. It's also profile is very different. Here, up front, up in that front, and then the trigger guard area is extremely different. Here and there. You can see where it's brazed on right there. That's how you tell the difference between a type 4 and a which is stamped and a milled brazed. Just check the blocks, what you have. Make sure it's nice and dark. Rear bevels, we're talking about the rear lug that locks into the back side of the receiver. So this one here has bevels right here and here. This one does not. It's square from the top when you look at it. Okay. Yes or no. Then it asks you over here if it has a front bevel. So basically the gun side where the round comes out, whether there's a bevel here or not. This is a early inland, so it has a bevel. This is no bevel. That's the differences between the two. It's very thin on the top side here. It's very thick over here. Okay, that's what we refer to as a front bevel. Now, markings could be all over this, and you really have to look carefully. This happens to be a very early inland. So on the left-hand side, we have a flaming bomb. No other markings. This side, we have a tall inland logo. This has been refinished. And then you look at the bottoms. And sometimes the side rail, some standard products will have them over here for their milled variety. Sometimes I've seen flaming bombs here. This is an early inland, and it also has a mark right down inside here. Right there. So it's probably an inspector mark of some type. Put the marks, put it down. Left side, don't forget, is the left side of the gun as you're firing. Right is obviously the right side of the gun. The magazine well, the only time I've ever seen a mark in there is for Underwood. I don't know if I can get it to focus. Right there, right in the center of the screen. Now this Underwood also has other markings. Just because you see one marking, you still need to continue looking around. This one happens to have a 2 right there. A lot of Underwoods have flaming bombs in the bottom. Look for flaming bombs in this area. It's not always this type. Sometimes they're a lot smaller. Winchesters sometimes have it on the bottom flat right there. Usually a number or a letter. So be careful when you're looking around for the marks on the trigger housings. Hole behind the magazine catch area. So this is the magazine catch area we're talking about. This is where you would push the button. Well, on the opposite side is a smaller diameter hole. This was a later feature. They still want to know if it's there or not. Sometimes when they refinish stuff, they added it. Annotate if it's there or not. The hammer recess for the spring What they're talking about is this area right here. So this little cut area right here, that's where the hammer spring would fit into. Some earlier inlands, it was just flat straight across. So that's what they're talking about, the hammer spring recess. Yes or no, does it have it? While we're talking about the hammer springs, there are two types. There's an earlier, shorter version, which is known as 22 coils, and all you have to do is just count across of the coils, and then later 26 and a half. Hammer plunger, is it blued or in the white? Some were parked. If you have something that's a different anomaly that is not listed, like say it's parked, just put a footnote on the corner and then flip on the other side and write it down, parked. Some of them I have seen are part marked. I've seen like an S and a C in that area before. You'd also put a note down for that. Rear wall. So as the gun is firing, we're in this section's right here, we're looking, this is where the bullet's coming out. So the first one is narrow wall. That's this one, where this back wall to the magazine would go, does not come all the way to the left and to the right side on both sides. That changed over in about the type 2, definitely into the type 3s, where this is known as a wide wall. Goes all the way out to the edge. Same thing with this side. You would mark that as a wide wall. Now, the M2, we talked about a little bit earlier, it was made where there's special cutouts here. It's wide to the left, but on this side, it's cut on the right. That would be a wide left M2 cut. Check this one. Some rebuilding processes actually made earlier variants into the M2, so be careful. Color, this would be a gray color. This is a deep green color. Write it down, be specific. Dark gray, light gray, black, brown sometimes, or loss of the finish. You can also put that in. Now we're going to magazine catches. This is an early magazine catch. I'll start coming in here. That's a long faced, and it's long because of this tip here. Long serrated. Okay. You can also look at the profile that way. Long serrated. They made another variant where they cut this off and it's still serrated, but that's called a short face. It's just this part from here this way is on there. That would be the 1A right there. The long plain faced is the same, but it's not serrated. It's smooth, but yet it still retains the long portion. This was later cut off and made into this variation. So on the form it says a 3. Now, just to tell you guys the difference, this little step here has to be very thin. It's only the width of my tip of my pin. Just be careful. Look for markings here, and it should be a short little step right there. That's a short plain faced. Then we get into the modifieds. So this is the number 4. This is an M. This step is a lot thicker now. It almost takes the whole barrel of my pin in there. M. Bigger step. Push harder up against the back of the magazine. Okay. That M changes to, they call it 4A or whatever it is. It's just serifed differently. That's what the 4A is for. Mine's marked W.I. It's the only change there. Then you go into the ones for the M2's variety, and it has this extra protrusion here. It has an M, which means modified, and an underline. Sometimes this was missing. You could look for marks. Basically, I've seen marks on the front in here, 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 and here. And I would also annotate which way that they actually orientate. Here's a later type without an M on it. This one seems to be cast. This one actually is marked right there with a 5. But I can tell it's cast just by looking at it. So be careful. let's go into the, oops, we're gonna go into the safeties. This one's checkered and has a different back to it. Then it's gonna go into smooth face with the same back, smooth face with a different internal cut, and then the flip types. So this is a type 1. It's checkered. You can feel the difference. This one happens to have bevels on the ends. And the interior here is an oval cut with 2 holes and a bridge in between. I've never seen these marked. Type 2 is very similar, except they got rid of the checkerings on both ends. I have seen some of these marked on the insides, and a few of them are marked on the ends, like IPs. I have seen a transitional to the type 3. So the left one is the type 2 on the form, and the type 3 is the one on the right. It's a different cut for positive movement of the spring and plungers, but I have seen this type, a transitional, where you can absolutely see that there was cuts made like the type 2, and then they modified it and made it a type 3. The opposite sides are all the same. It's just a cut for the clearance for the trigger. And the last type is a type 4. It's also common called a flip. Be careful because they're marked. Sometimes this one's double marked. It's SS in a circle, Sedgley, and this one has an N dot. But if you also flip it over, it also still has this Sedgley mark on it. So look on both sides, annotate both marks. I haven't seen one marked on the end yet. That's a type 4. Now going along with those mag catches and the safeties, all the ones with the M or the M2 extra protrusion took a longer variety. Just make sure that you count the number of coils, and you should annotate that. It's not on the form, but you can put it on the back. Hammers, parkerized, blued, no finish, right? Parkerized, blued, no finish, or in the white. They don't have the numbers here, but this is early dog legs. We're moving through the dog legs to heavy, straight, and then the front profiles are here. And then what are the markings? So this one is the first type. It's got a notch in it. You can see that it matches this profile here and that profile there. So you would check those 2 off and then talk about the finish. This one's blued, so that I would check off blued. It has any marks. I've seen marks in here, on the face over here. I've seen some here. I've seen some here, and some on the left-hand side in this area. Saginaw sometimes has them upside down in this little arced area. That's a type 1. Type 2 dog leg is almost the exact same. This one happens to be an Underwood, but this area changed. Now it's angled. That's a type 2. There's a variant of that called a heavy dog leg. The heavy dog leg is this one here. That's the one with just the angle dog leg, slot dog leg, heavy dog leg. This one is like a almost type of a blue dew light type of finish. It almost looks like it's parked, but it's not. Write that down. Here's a straight hammer in the white, no finish whatsoever. It's got a straight profile on the side and matches this one here. Matches this one here. And then when the front profile, when you look at it, there's a cut here and no cut on the left-hand side. Cut here, no cut left-hand side. That's an M1 hammer. Different than an M2 hammer. Looks exactly the same from the side profile. But when you turn it over, we have a cut here and a cut here, which matches up with this one. See the cut down there and the cut up there? That's an M2. Don't use this in an M1. This will rattle around and not fire properly and screw up your back of your bolt. But this is an M2 hammer. Sears, very simple, marked or unmarked. Be careful, look for marks all over. I've seen them on both sides, underneath and on the top, and I've seen some that are double marked. This one does not have a hole. This one has a hole. If I can focus on it, there we go. That has a hole. The general profile is the same as the earlier one. These are both M1s, only for the M1s. There's also varieties with a grind mark there in lieu of the hole. Be careful. This is an M2. Yes, you can use it in an M1, but it's specifically for the M2. It is a replacement part. They're usually almost always marked on the sides. There's a big step right here, and it has to work with what's disconnector. They also have a hole. Annotate that. Sometimes they're just punch marked, so be careful. Now the Sear springs themselves, the early variety, did not have a tapered end. It's squared off, top to bottom. The later ones had a little tapered end to it on both ends. That's later. They want to know what the taper is. That's this one right here. Straight or tapered ends. And then any markings on the trigger. Yep. Last thing, right? Gotta drop the camera. So, let's see if we can focus in on that. This one happens to be marked right here. I've seen markings in this area, on the arm, sometimes punch marks like this Winchester, Grand Rapids IP in here on this flat, and I've seen markings here, SG usually, and then over here I've seen Rockola. Be careful, it may be faint. You may have to take a little steel wool and just take a peek at it. Maybe corroded or cut over. I've never seen an early type trigger or comparator, so I'm not even going to talk about it, but it was the back of the pedestal here. Got any questions? Down in the bottom is the links to the form itself and its completeness. This is just an extract that I made. If you got any questions, put them in the comments. I'll answer them as best I can. And just last thing I want to show you. This is a cast mark. So if you have a cast trigger housing, annotate that in the back. We'll be making more videos for the Carbine Club, and we'll go through each section of the data sheet. All right, take care, folks.